Ethan Miller had built his life around quiet routines. 2 years after losing his wife, Grace, to a sudden illness, the silence of his apartment had become unbearable, so he sought refuge in Rosie's diner every evening. It was a small, old-fashioned place squeezed between a laundromat and a dusty bookstore, its neon sign flickering like a heartbeat in the night. The staff knew his order without asking: meatloaf with mashed potatoes, a side of green beans, and black coffee. He always sat in the far corner booth by the rain-speckled window, the one with the squeaky chair, where he could watch the world pass without having to be part of it. The low hum of chatter, clinking silverware, and the hiss of the coffee machine created a background noise that felt almost like company, though he never spoke to anyone beyond the waitress. That night, the rain was steady, tapping against the glass in a rhythm that matched the slow turn of his spoon in the coffee cup. Ethan was halfway through his meal when a small voice, soft yet surprisingly clear, broke through the diner's warm murmur. "Excuse me, mister, can my mom sit here?" He looked up to find a little girl standing beside his table. She couldn't have been more than 7, with damp brown hair clinging to her cheeks and a stuffed rabbit tucked protectively under her arm. Her eyes were wide, the kind that seemed to hold too much truth for her age. Behind her stood a woman, tall, slender, wearing a worn coat and an uncertain smile. Her posture was hesitant, like someone ready to be turned away. Ethan glanced around. The diner wasn't even full, there were empty tables scattered throughout. The request didn't make sense, but something about the little girl's voice, more pleading than curious, made him hesitate. Before he could reply, she tilted her head, clutching the rabbit tighter, and whispered, "We don't have anywhere else to sit." It wasn't true, but it was honest in a different way. Without overthinking it, Ethan set down his fork and nodded. "Of course," he said quietly, rising just enough to pull out the chair opposite him. The woman exhaled, a faint "thank you" escaping her lips, and the girl beamed as if he'd given her the world. As they slid into the booth, Ethan had no idea that this small, rain-damp moment would be the one to change the rest of his life. The woman introduced herself as Claire, and the little girl, still clutching her rabbit, was Lily. Claire's voice was soft, edged with weariness, the kind that comes from carrying more than her share of life's burdens. She slid into the booth opposite Ethan, smoothing Lily's damp hair with a mother's absent-minded care. Her eyes flicked briefly to the menu before she quickly shut it again, as if calculating every dollar in her head. Ethan noticed the hesitation but said nothing. When the waitress came by, Claire ordered the cheapest items, a bowl of soup for herself, a grilled cheese for Lily. Ethan caught the waitress's eye and, without a word, motioned that their meal would be on his bill. She gave a small nod before heading to the kitchen. Lily was the kind of child who filled silence without even trying. She introduced Ethan to Mr. Buttons, her stuffed rabbit, explaining in great detail how he'd been her bestest friend since she was 3. She told him about school, her favorite storybooks, and how she once tried to make cookies but forgot the sugar. Her animated storytelling drew a faint smile from Ethan, one he hadn't felt on his face in far too long. Claire, on the other hand, spoke less, answering Ethan's polite questions with short, careful sentences. He learned she worked part-time at a florist's shop, that she and Lily lived in a small apartment a few blocks away, and that there was no one else, no father, no extended family nearby. She didn't elaborate, but her guarded tone hinted at a history she wasn't ready to share. When their food arrived, Lily insisted Ethan try a bite of her grilled cheese. He laughed, really laughed, and for a moment, it startled him, as if the sound had been locked away. Claire noticed too, her expression softened, the faintest relief in her eyes. They ate slowly, the conversation warming like the coffee in their cups. By the time the plates were cleared, the 3 of them felt less like strangers sharing a table and more like something else. As they prepared to leave, Lily hopped down from the booth and wrapped her small arms around Ethan without hesitation. "See you soon, Mr. Ethan," she said, her voice certain, as if this night had already promised more. Claire gave a polite smile, but Ethan could see the gratitude behind it. And as they stepped out into the rain, he found himself hoping, no, needing, that promise to come true. In the days that followed, Ethan found himself glancing at the diner's door more often than he cared to admit. At first, he told himself it was coincidence when Claire and Lily appeared again. Then it happened a third time, and a fourth, and the truth became clear, they were all making it happen. Sometimes Ethan arrived first and watched the door until a small hand pressed against the glass and Lily's bright smile lit up the place. Other times, he'd find them already in their booth, Lily waving him over so eagerly that a few other diners couldn't help but smile. Without discussion, it became their unspoken tradition, they ate together now. Each evening unfolded in its own rhythm. Lily would chatter about her day, how she'd aced a spelling test, or how Mr. Buttons had been, on an adventure, in her backpack. Claire would share snippets about the flower shop, describing how the scent of fresh lilies filled the air or how a customer had come in asking for a single rose, for someone he couldn't stop thinking about. Ethan listened more than he spoke, but when he did, he found himself telling them things he hadn't shared with anyone since Grace passed. One night, as they lingered over slices of apple pie, Ethan spoke about Grace. How she used to hum while cooking, how she always left him a note in his lunchbox when he worked late shifts, how her absence had left a space so large he thought nothing could fill it. Claire didn't interrupt. She just reached across the table and gave his hand a light squeeze, her touch saying what words couldn't. Lily, blissfully unaware of the full weight behind the stories, just knew that she liked Mr. Ethan. He listened to her, he never seemed too busy, and he laughed at all her jokes, even the silly ones. She began drawing him pictures, stick figures of the three of them at the diner, Mr. Buttons perched proudly between them. Ethan kept each drawing, slipping them carefully into his wallet as if they were treasures. As the weeks passed, Ethan realized something had shifted. The corner booth no longer felt like a place of quiet escape, it felt like a place he belonged. And though none of them said it aloud, each night they met at Rosie's was beginning to feel less like chance and more like the start of something they all needed. The leaves had turned to shades of gold and amber by the time the moment came. Rosie's diner had dressed itself for autumn, with paper leaves taped to the windows and the smell of pumpkin pie drifting through the air. Ethan arrived early, as he often did, sliding into their usual booth and ordering coffee while he waited. A few minutes later, the door swung open, and Lily bounded inside, her cheeks pink from the cool air. Claire followed, her smile soft but tired from another long day at the flower shop. They settled in as they always did, Lily chattering about her school art project, Claire asking Ethan how work had been. The warmth of the booth, the clink of cutlery, and the familiar rhythm of their voices felt almost like home. Then, in the middle of sipping her hot chocolate, Lily set her cup down and looked at Ethan with a seriousness far beyond her years. "Mr. Ethan," she said slowly, "I told my teacher today that you're my friend. But I wish you were more than that." Ethan smiled faintly, curious. "More than a friend?" he asked. Lily nodded, her eyes unwavering. "Yeah. Like my dad. Can you be my dad?" The question struck him like a warm wave, stealing his breath for a moment. Claire's eyes widened, a flush of color rising in her cheeks as she opened her mouth to apologize. But Ethan shook his head gently, keeping his gaze on Lily. Something inside him shifted, something that had been locked away since Grace's passing. The idea of family had once seemed impossible, but here it was, sitting across from him, asking with complete trust. "I'd like that, Lily," he said softly, his voice steady. Lily's smile spread wide, and she threw her arms around him without hesitation. Claire's eyes shimmered, her lips trembling as she whispered, "You don't have to," but Ethan stopped her with a small shake of his head. "I want to," he said simply. From that night on, things changed. They still met at the diner, but they also spent evenings together in Claire's cozy apartment, helping Lily with homework, cooking dinner, laughing over silly board games. Ethan's corner booth was no longer a refuge from loneliness, it was a reminder of the night his life began again. He never ate alone there again.